Do you have an interest in learning about sustainable development and conservation in Lesotho? Do you want to delve deep into the strides that are being made to help improve livelihood in Lesotho? Do buckle up and join us on this journey as we learn about what LHDA is doing to help improve livelihood. Today we have Datempo Brown with us, who is going to share with us and walk with us this journey of learning how livelihood is improved in Lesotho. We have Datempo Brown. Date, it's very nice to meet you. Very nice to have you.
Thank you.
I think my first question would be, give us a brief background about LHDA.
All right, Galibone, it's very good to be here. I find that when we speak about the LHDA, it's almost always important to talk about why it was established. And this goes back even before the treaty was signed in 1986. What was very obvious at the time, some people cite it as far back, talks started as far back as the 50s, but dates differ depending on who you're speaking to.
Yes.
What was very clear at the time was that there were two very critical needs on both the side of Lesotho as a country and on the South African side. In South Africa, there was a dire need for a stable and consistent supply of water in large amounts. This was largely driven by the developments that were happening at the time, industrial development that was happening at the time, and the mining industry that was proliferating at the time.
Yes.
So there was a need for large amounts of water to be driven to the Gauteng region for those developments. In Lesotho, equally, there was a very clear need for development across the board. There was need for electricity in Lesotho. There was need for infrastructure development in Lesotho, and there was need for endless numbers of various types of developments.
Yes.
And when the two countries were on the table looking at what some of the options might be, South Africa had done a study to see if what would happen if they set up this system of tunnels and dams on the South African side. So as soon as essentially the water in the Orange River and the Senqu River hits South Africa, they could have set up a similar scheme with tunnels and dams, but that would require pumping water to the Gauteng region using electricity.
Yes.
That scheme, it turns out, could have been very expensive compared to setting up a similar scheme on the Lesotho side, where the altitude is quite high. And the water would travel down, driven by gravity, and it would hit the Gauteng region without the added expenses of pumping the water. That meant that part of the problem could be solved. One of the nations could address the huge need for water, but there was also what developments in Lesotho that would come with that. Large-scale infrastructure development projects would result as a part of that. What the two countries then also agreed was that because of this saving that will be made by setting up the scheme on the Lesotho side, compared to what it would cost if it was set up in South Africa, because of that saving, then we can share the benefit of that money saved. And that sharing of benefits is sometimes what we now know in Lesotho as the royalties that the South African government pays to the Lesotho government. There was a cost saving by setting up the scheme on the Lesotho side, and that saving the two countries agreed to share amongst themselves almost equal percentages. Right? But the long and short of it is that based on these negotiations and this double coincidence of needs, if you will, the two countries decided to then get into this agreement that we now know as the LHWP Treaty. And as the two countries decided on how to operationalize the treaty, then there were two institutions set up. On the Lesotho side, the LHDA was set up by the LHDA Order, which is a legal instrument that essentially gave us the right to exist, and the LHDA Act. And that was the birth of LHDA in 1986. Similarly, on the South African side, a similar institution was set up. It is known as the TCTA, the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority. They are essentially a sister company to the LHDA doing similar work managing the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, but on the South African side of the border. So in a nutshell, this is sort of the origin story of the LHDA and how it came about. We were established to look after the implementation of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project on the Lesotho side of the border.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Right.
You've touched a bit on projects that the LHDA actually handles from inception. So I'd like you to tell us a bit more about some of the projects and the initiatives that LHDA oversees.
Right. Good question. So we are known for a few things conventionally, and I'll explain perhaps what else we do except for what we're conventionally known for. But in terms of what the LHDA does and has done so far in the past 37 years now, we implement the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, which is made up of various components. The water transfer component is the building of dams and tunnels to harness the water of the Senqu River and other rivers that feed into the Senqu, and through a network of those dams and tunnels, channel that water for delivery, mostly to South Africa. Right? That's one aspect of the project, water transfer. The projects that have been done so far under water transfer, phase 1 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, that included the building of the Katse Dam and the Muela Hydropower Station. Those were the first sort of large infrastructure assets that were built. That was phase 1A. As part of phase 1 as well, there was the building of Mohale Dam, which was in addition to Katse Dam, and that was phase 1B. These sort of infrastructure pieces addressed those two things that we spoke about in the beginning. How do we harness this river and form a network of a system to channel the water to where it's needed? At the same time, use that same network of tunnels and dams to generate electricity in Lesotho for Lesotho, and as well as contribute towards other developments such as infrastructure, the roads, the schools, public health facilities, and others. So phase 1 is one of the main things that the project, that the LHDA does and looks after to this day. Construction was done. Now we're in a phase of operating and maintaining that tunnel of dams and systems, as well as the hydropower station, and other initiatives that go along with it that we'll get to. Secondly, it's phase 2, which is now underway. There's construction of the dam at Budihadi, the Budihadi Dam. There's construction of the Budihadi Tunnel that will channel water from Budihadi Dam into the Katse Dam. And from the Katse Dam, the water travels through the Muela Hydropower Station, and then it goes across the border to South Africa. Under phase 2 as well, there has been development of advanced infrastructure. Advanced infrastructure are all the things that need to happen before we start building the dams and the tunnels. We need people to have a place to live. So there was the development of the Budihadi village, which was part of the advanced infrastructure. So it's housing, it's recreational centers, it's schools, it's clinics. The Budihadi Lodge is part of that. The Budihadi Operations Center is part of that. So these are all part of the advanced infrastructure portfolio, which is all the things that we need to do before we start building the big stuff. But also part of advanced infrastructure is let's make sure there's electricity in the area. So heavy duty power lines to make sure that electricity gets to the Budihadi area in Mogotlong. Telecommunications networks had to be set up to make sure that communication can happen. So all of these have been done. These are things that had to be done before we started working on the dam and the tunnel.
Yes.
So these are some of the projects that the LHD is also looking after. Over and above the engineering, the infrastructure, the construction, there's a big side of the project that the LHD is also looking after. There is an element of environmental sustainability. We have a very full understanding that unless we take care of the environment, we won't have the water. Yes. If we don't have the water, the infrastructure is pointless, right? So we have quite comprehensive environmental protection initiatives to make sure that our wetlands are protected, the rangelands are protected or rehabilitated, because a lot of the wetlands and the rangelands in Lesotho, unfortunately, have been degraded due to various reasons. So part of our job is trying to make sure that those ones that have been damaged are rehabilitated and the ones that are still in good condition are then protected. This is a huge portfolio within what we do at the LHDA as well. We do a lot of livelihoods restoration initiatives. And by livelihoods restoration simply means building large infrastructure requires large spaces. You need land. So with that comes the displacement of people in some instances. In some instances, it comes with acquiring assets from people that they use for their own livelihoods, such as fields where they grow their food. So a huge part of our work also is making sure that we restore what the project had to take for us to build what we needed to build. So the compensation and resettlement projects are a big part of the work that the LHDA does. If we don't do those, we won't be able to achieve any of the other. If we don't take care of the people we have affected, the dams and the tunnels are as good as pointless. Now, the last piece of this also is you can restore by compensating for what you have taken, like for like, right? Or equal for equal. Yes. But when you, for example, resettle somebody from here to a different place, in a sense, you change their way of living or what they're used to. So another set of programs that we implement are livelihoods improvement programs. So this is, you have restored, but now how do you improve to make sure that this person sustainably can continue to feed themselves and live a better life than perhaps what they were doing before. Now, I should say these are large, complex goals to achieve, but it's a very, very important part of the work that the LHDA does. And then the other ones that I can speak about are our contributions to tourism. We quickly figured out or realized after the development of phase one that people come from all corners of the world to come and see these huge pieces of infrastructure that we've developed. And that means an economic stream for the country as a whole. So we have started finding ways now to harness that and make sure that the tourism value chain can benefit Basotho and Lesotho as a whole. So in a nutshell, that's most of what the LHDA does and others.
Okay, in relation to all of that, the mouthful that you said, you mentioned something about how people have ideas about what the LHDA does.
Yeah.
What is that one thing that you'd like the masses to know, like the one highlighted factor that you think is important for people to know?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of misconceptions that come with everything that you've explained.
Right.
But what is that one thing that people should know that the LHDA does and actually stands for?
Thank you for that question. It's the third word in our name, development.
Yes.
At the core of the LHDA, we are a development institution. I think because for the longest time, the organization has been known for and awarded for excellence in engineering and big, large-scale construction. Some of those plaques on the walls are awards for engineering excellence, which is great. But that's not what we're about. That is a vehicle to development. So that's what I would like people to know and take away from this, is that we are a development institution. So everything that you see us doing is because at the end of the day, the interest is how do we help the country and the people develop from this project. Yes.
That sounds like a good thing, development.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one last question. I don't know if it's a question or if it's just a statement, but it requires a response. I'd like to know what you could say about LHDA, a fact that is not known, despite the misconceptions, something that we don't know, but that is LHDA essentially.
Sure, the facts are endless. The facts are endless, to be honest. But I'll pick this one because I know that it's the one that a lot of people care about and what the country needs economically. It's jobs. Phase one of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project in total created about close to 16,000 jobs for Basotho. I quote that fact because usually when phase 2 now is sort of now starting to ramp up in terms of the construction, there's a lot of employment opportunity being created for people. But we know that the demand for jobs in the country far outpaces the supply. Yes. So as much as the project will create some jobs, we're not nearly close enough to cover all the jobs that are needed. But I wanted to cite that fact to show that the project is large enough to produce a number of jobs that is not negligible. 16,000 is a big number of jobs to create in an economy of this size. And so our hope and our belief is that phase 2 is going to do a lot to contribute towards job creation in the country as well. But I wanted people to take away that fact that a lot of thousands of jobs have been created for Lesotho, and thousands of jobs will continue to be created for Lesotho under this project.
Thank you so much for entertaining my questions.
No, thank you for the questions. Those are all very important questions.
That is it from me today, ladies and gentlemen. We'll continue to learn more about LHDA and what LHDA is about and how LHDA is important to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.